Mr. Barry Lituchy.
Thank you. Thank you, Radmila. Our delegation will be issuing a press release later today. I apologize for not having that at this time. I would like to thank the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Ministry of Information and also the people of Yugoslavia for their generous assistance and cooperation in helping us to carry out our investigation here in Yugoslavia.
Želeo bih da zahvalim Ministarstvu spoljnih poslova, Ministarstvu informisanja, kao i svim Jugoslovenima koji su nam pomogli i sarađivali sa nama u izvršenju naše misije.
During the past 2 weeks, our delegation has traveled across Serbia to investigate evidence of NATO war crimes.
Tokom posljednje 2 nedelje naša delegacija je putovala po Srbiji istražujući ratne zločine.
We have visited Novi Sad, Pančevo, Niš, Aleksinac, Kragujevac, Grdelica, Ćuprija, Srdelica, Rakovica, and other parts of Belgrade, as well as numerous other smaller towns and villages.
Posjetili smo pomenute gradove, kao i u samom Beogradu mesta bombardovana, kao i mnoga druga manja mesta.
There is no question that we have done our job.
Nema spora da smo obavili naš posao.
We have found extensive evidence of NATO war crimes.
Pronašli smo dokaze u izobilju o ratnim zločinima NATO.
All across Serbia, we have discovered evidence of deliberate targeting of civilian infrastructure and residential neighborhoods.
Širom Srbije otkrili smo dokaze smišljenog ciljenja civila i civilnih objekata infrastrukture.
Schools, hospitals, bridges, roads, residential neighborhoods, as well as the industry itself.
Škole, mostovi, stambene četvrti, kao i mnogi drugi civilni objekti.
In Zemun and other locations in Belgrade, we have seen and documented with videotape the deliberate destruction of electrical transformers at the power station there with graphite bombs and cruise missiles.
U Zemunu smo obišli i snimili gađenje trafostanice, pogađenu trafostanicu koja je gađena grafitnim i običnim raketama.
This one example of the deliberate destruction of electrical transformers threatens the survival of more than 2 million people in and around Belgrade.
Samo ovaj slučaj, kada je pogođena trafostanica i to namerno, ugrozio je živote 2 miliona ljudi.
Due to the loss of heating in the winter.
Zbog gubitka grejanja u predstojećoj zimi.
In Pančevo, Novi Sad, and Kragujevac, we have seen the wanton destruction of petrochemical ammonia plants and chemical substances such as pyralion, which have poured into the water, soil, and air of Yugoslavia.
U Pančevu, Kragujevcu, one more.
Kragujevac, Novi Sad.
Novi Sad. U Pančevu, Kragujevcu i Novom Sadu uverili smo se da su namerno gađeni petrohemijski objekti, usled čega je došlo do izlivanja opasnih materija u Dunav.
There is no question that this was a deliberate act of ecological destruction by NATO.
A nema spora da je i ovo bio namerno rušenje i ekološko uništavanje NATO.
It has contaminated several 100,000 gallons of water in these 3 cities alone.
Samo u ovom distriktu, u ovoj oblasti, to je zatrovalo na milione litara vode.
As well as endangered the health of tens of millions of people across the Balkans.
I ugrozilo život 10 miliona ljudi širom Balkana.
The result is a potential environmental and health catastrophe due to the spillage of dioxins, heavy metals, and other carcinogenic substances that could affect the population of this region for several generations to come.
Rezultat je zatrovavanje sredine izlivanjem otrovnih i kancerogenih materija. Ugrožava zdravlje ljudi, naravno.
Along with that, we have seen sites of destruction where traces of depleted uranium have been found.
Također su pronađeni tragovi osiromašenog uranijuma.
Most recently, in our trip to the Zastava factory in Kragujevac,
u najnovijem primjeru to je prilikom posete Zastavi Kragujevačkoj.
The deliberate use of depleted uranium weapons against civilian targets such as these is irrefutable evidence of crimes against humanity and crimes of genocide against the whole population of Yugoslavia.
A dokazi da je korišćen osiromašeni uranijum svedoče o tome da je reč o zločinima genocida I zločinima protiv čovečnosti.
In Belgrade, Aleksinac, and Niš, we have seen hospitals and clinics that were directly targeted by cluster bombs.
U Beogradu I drugim mestima videli smo uništene bolnice I klinike koje su namerno gađane kasetnim bombama.
This too is a violation of international conventions on war and a clear war crime.
Ovo je takođe očigledan prekršaj ratnih konvencija I humanitarnog prava. Čisti ratni zločin.
On the use of illegal weapons, we have collected an enormous amount of first-hand video documentation, as well as first-hand testimonies on the use of cluster bombs, phosphorus bombs, and cruise missiles.
O korišćenju zabranjenog nelegalnog oružja prikupili smo puno dokaza I snimili smo dosta materijala, a takođe smo I snimili svedočenja neposrednih.
In the city of Niš, which experienced the worst destruction in Yugoslavia after Kosovo, we have seen many examples and documented them of the targeting of civilian areas, such as the central marketplace, the residential area surrounding it, the nearby bus station, and so on.
U Nišu, u gradu koji je posle Kosova najteže pogođen bombardovanjem, uverili smo se da su korišćene, da su gađani smišljeno civilni objekti I to na pijaci, zatim stambene četvrti, zatim autobuska stanica kao I ostali objekti.
On the street of Aneta Andrejević alone and adjoining streets, 15 civilians were killed and many others wounded due to attacks with cluster bombs.
Samo u ulici Anete Stojanović poginulo je preko 50, odnosno nastradalo je preko 50 ljudi od kasetne bombe. 15 je poginulo, a ostali su povređeni.
For our delegation, this was a shocking and horrendous example of repeated attacks and of atrocities against the Yugoslav population.
Našu delegaciju je šokirala činjenica da su više puta napadani ti civilni objekti.
This was the most memorable, but there were many other locations where we documented similar attacks.
Ovo je bilo najupečatljivije, znači ovo u Nišu, ali ima tu I drugih primjera, naravno.
By studying and documenting the use of cluster bombs, we have learned a great deal about their use.
Proučavajući dokumente o upotrebi kasetnih bombi, dosta toga smo o njima naučili I o njihovoj upotrebi.
On the highway from Belgrade to Niš, we observed and filmed the true nature of cluster bomb attacks.
Na putu Beograd-Niš, na autoputu Beograd-Niš, pronašli smo I snimili tragove kasetne bombe.
There we found in a completely isolated stretch of road with no civilian structures nearby, the distinctive scattered markings of a cluster bomb attack.
Ovde smo pronašli u oblasti gde nema ničeg drugog osim civilnih objekata, dokaze da je korišćena kasetna bomba.
What was especially interesting about this one cluster bomb attack was the fact that it showed that cluster bombs are not designed to destroy structures at all.
Ono što je interesantno u ovom slučaju jeste da on pokazuje da kasetne bombe nisu predviđene da uništavaju infrastrukture.
There were no buildings and the highway itself was not seriously damaged.
A čak ni sam autoput nije mnogo uništen.
The use of this bomb was purely for the purpose of killing civilians.
Zapravo suština je da je cilj kasetnih bombi, svrha kasetnih bombi uništavanje ljudi.
This is one of the most telling examples for us of the real terrorism of the NATO aggression and of the anonymous and premeditated effort to destroy the civilian population of Yugoslavia.
Ovo je za nas najrečitiji dokaz terorističkog karaktera operacije NATO I smišljene namere da se vrše zločin.
In several other locations, we saw examples of cluster bombs that again were designed purely for the murdering of civilians and not for the destruction of any particular structure.
I na drugim mestima smo videli tragove delovanja kasetnih bombi, čiji cilj nije bio da unište neke objekte ili infrastrukturu, nego isključivo ubijanje civila.
Now, on the other hand, at Kragujevac, at the Zastava factory,
S druge strane, u Kragujevcu, u Zastavi,
we have witnessed and filmed the use of satellite-guided bombs designed to destroy not people, but civilian structures.
Videli smo i snimili posledice delovanja satelitski vođene bombe, čiji cilj ne da ubija ljude, već upravo da uništava infrastrukturu.
This contrasting evidence actually complements each other.
Ovi kontrastni, suprotstavljeni dokazi zapravo se međusobno nadopunjuju.
What it signifies is how the use of different types of weaponry on different types of targets is a confirmation of a larger overall plan of deliberate economic, civilian, and ecological destruction.
To zapravo govori o tome da se korišćenje više različitog oružja za više različitih ciljeva je deo jedne osmišljenog plana uništavanja ekološkog, ekonomskog i svakog drugog.
What we observe or discover from this by putting together the different pieces of these different attacks is a war not aimed at any particular military target, but at an entire nation, actually a war of genocide.
Kad smo sklopili sve komadiće ovog mozaika, dobili smo sliku rata koji nije bio uperen protiv vojnih ciljeva, nego protiv čitave zemlje, čitave nacije.
In yet another example, we filmed evidence in Niš of the use of phosphorus bombs on industrial infrastructure, and we observed that this was a deliberate effort. Phosphorus, yeah.
U Nišu smo pak videli i snimili dokaze korišćenja fosforne bombe na određenom objektu.
This is another piece to the puzzle of crimes of genocide, the deliberate destruction of the economic capacity of the country.
To je još jedan komadić mozaika koji govori o smišljenom uništavanju ekonomskog kapaciteta.
On this point of the industrial capacity, I think we should also add that we observed particular types of industry that were targeted.
Kad je već o industriji reč, treba naglasiti da su uništavane određene grane industrije.
In particular, we saw the targeting, or one of the striking conclusions that we drew was the particular targeting of state enterprises and of cooperative enterprises.
Najviše pada u oči da su pre svega gađana državna preduzeća.
This is clearly an effort by the war planners to destroy socialized property in Yugoslavia.
To otvoreno govori o planovima agresora da unište socijalnu, državnu imovinu, društvenu imovinu.
We also observed, we concluded based on testimonies of individuals that it was the opinion of many individuals in southern Serbia that particular towns were hit primarily as political targets.
Takođe iz svedočenja, naročito u južnoj Srbiji, videli smo da vlada mišljenje da su mnogi ciljevi birani po političkom principu.
In other words, to destroy the political leadership most determined to preserve socialized property in Yugoslavia.
Drugim rečima, da se uništi političko rukovodstvo koje je rešeno da sačuva tu društvenu imovinu.
Furthermore, we have also conducted dozens of interviews with civilians who either survived or witnessed attacks on residential areas.
Obavili smo također puno razgovora sa civilima koji su bili svedoci ili su preživeli napade na civile.
And we have also conducted interviews with members of the Serbian, Roma, Egyptian, and even Albanian communities of Kosovo who were forced to flee as refugees from Kosovo.
Također smo razgovarali sa pripadnicima romske, egipćanske, pa čak i albanske zajednice sa Kosova koji su bili primorani da pobegnu sa Kosova.
These testimonies, along with our additional first-hand evidence, will be presented to Ramsey Clark in New York and will provide an abundance of proof for the overall strategy of the United States and NATO to destroy Yugoslavia.
Ovi dokazi i svedočenja bit će podneti prosleđeni Ramsiju Clarku, a predstavljaće dokaz da su kakva je strategija Sjedinjenih država i NATO, odnosno da je ona da se uništi Jugoslaviju.
As well as to ethnically cleanse Kosovo of all non-Albanian and non-KLA Albanians.
Kao i dokazi da za nameru da se etnički očisti Kosovo od svih nealbanaca i svih koji ne pripadaju UČK.
As part of the strategy for creating a greater Albania to dominate the Balkans militarily, economically, and politically.
U okviru strategije stvaranja velike Albanije koja bi vojno, ekonomski i u svakom drugom pogledu dominirala Balkan.
Among the many other indictments brought against the NATO leadership in the Ramsey-Clark indictment, we also have carried out investigations regarding the political and military leaders and the individual pilots and military personnel responsible for the crimes in Yugoslavia.
U vezi sa nekim delovima optužnice Ramsija Clarka, mi smo izvršili istragu uvezanu za određene vojne ličnosti i pilote koji su učestvovali u ovoj operaciji.
On a personal note, I was myself moved and inspired by the people of Yugoslavia during our interviews with refugees and civilian victims.
Mene su lično dirnule mnoge izjave svedoka sa kojima sam razgovarala.
By the great energy of the people and the widespread determination of the Yugoslav people to overcome these acts of genocide.
I dirnulo me je njihova rešenost da prevaziđu i da izdrže jednostavno ovaj genocid.
Our human rights tasks primarily focused on collecting evidence of these NATO war crimes.
Naše ispitivanje poštovanja ljudskih prava, excuse me, can you repeat?
Yes, of collecting evidence of these NATO war crimes.
Aha, svelo se uglavnom na prikupljanje dokaza o ratnim zločinima. NATO.
This we have done in abundance. This we have done in abundance.
Aha, to smo uradili, imali smo dosta dokaza u izobilju.
And so we are so successful that we cannot possibly give you a complete balance sheet of everything we have uncovered here.
I toliko smo imali uspeha u tome da maltene ništa nije ostalo nepokriveno.
And we need more time to analyze all of the data that we've collected.
Treba nam malo više vremena da analiziramo sve ove prikupljene podatke.
The bulk of our work, of course, will come when we return to the United States.
Glavninu našeg posla obavit ćemo kad se vratimo u Sjedinjene države.
We will bring this evidence to the media,
te dokaze ćemo preneti medijima,
to NGOs,
nevladinim organizacijama,
and to peace organizations in the United States.
Mirovnim organizacijama.
Our delegation is comprised of 2 TV journalists, Joe Friendly and Richard Fishkin,
U sastavu naše delegacije su i 2 TV novinara
who will produce numerous programs for cable television.
koji su snimili mnoge programe za kabelsku televiziju.
Our delegation also consists of skilled writers such as Michael Parenti and Gregory Elich.
Tu su bili iskusni publicisti Michael Parenti i Gregory Elich.
And we will together be presenting many articles and information to the to journals and to the public in the United States.
I mi svi zajedno spremamo puno članaka i puno nastupanja u medijima u Sjedinjenim državama.
We intend also to do work on the internet
Također nameravamo da se angažujemo na internetu
in order to create a website about our delegation and the work here that we want to carry out in Yugoslavia.
otvaranjem web sajta o našoj poseti Jugoslaviji.
The Ramsey-Clark Commission will perhaps in the long run be more of a political and educational process rather than a legal one.
Komisija Ramsija Clarka biće manje pravna, znači radit će više politički, a manje će imati pravni karakter u početku.
But in the end, we believe that it will help in collecting the necessary evidence to achieve some sort of justice for the victims in the future.
Ali na kraju nadam se da će svi ti napori uložiti plodom da se prikupe dokazi koji bi izvojevali pravdu za žrtve ove agresije.
And in the near future to mobilize international world opinion against NATO.
A u bližoj budućnosti cilj je da mobiliše javno mnjenje.
Protiv NATO.
Protiv NATO, da.
Standing in the wreckage of the Zastava plant, one is reminded of scenes from Stalingrad or Dresden.
Stojeći pored ruševina neke fabrike pada nam na slika Drezdena.
Stalingrada.
And Stalingrad.
I Stalingrada.
Our NGO, the Jasenovac Research Institute, is dedicated to the search for justice for all victims of genocide in the Balkans throughout the centuries.
Naš rad, naše nevladine organizacije i Instituta za Jasenovac jeste da se izvojuje neka pravda za sve žrtve genocida tokom čitavog ovog veka na Balkanu.
We believe, as I mentioned before, that the crimes of genocide committed during World War II are at the very heart of the destruction of Yugoslavia today.
Verujemo da u Jugoslaviji ono što se dešavalo za vreme Drugog svjetskog rata podsjeća na ovo danas.
Kragujevac is known to historians as the scene of a great atrocity during World War II.
Kragujevac takođe bio mesto teškog zločina za vreme Drugog svjetskog rata.
We must be sure that the atrocity committed in Kragujevac in 1999 is added next to the first atrocity in the history books.
Verujemo da i ovo sada što se dešavalo u Kragujevcu 1999.
Mi ćemo da osiguramo, mi ćemo da...
nalazi mesto u knjizi o zverstvima počinjenim na Balkanu.
And it is not surprising that the monument to the first atrocity at Kragujevac was destroyed by NATO.
Excuse me?
It's not surprising that the memorial to the victims of at Kragujevac in World War II was destroyed by NATO.
Da, i nije ni čudo što je NATO uništio spomenik iz Drugog svjetskog rata u Kragujevcu, koji govori o zverstvu tamo.
That is another clear parallel between the fascism of Nazi Germany and the fascistic nature of the NATO aggression today.
To povlači još jednu paralelu između fašističke Nemačke i fašističke prirode NATO agresije.
We will do everything in our power when we return to educate the public.
Učinit ćemo sve što je u našoj moći da obrazujemo javnost, da utičemo na nju.
To fight for reparations for Yugoslavia.
Da se borimo za reparacije za Jugoslaviju.
And to make sure that we do better this time than we did after Jasenovac.
I da se potrudimo da ostvarimo veće rezultate nego što je postignuto u vezi sa Jasenovcem.
In gaining justice for the victims of Western aggression against the peoples of Yugoslavia.
Tražeći pravdu za žrtve agresije, zapadne agresije protiv naroda Jugoslavije.
And so that is my brief, not so brief summary of
to je moj kratki pregled naše posete.
Of our findings.
Ali ne baš tako kratak.
And I would like to allow some other members of our delegation to say a few words about their investigation and their findings.
O njihovim utiscima I onome što su oni vidjeli.
Perhaps I'll first introduce Mr. Ken Freeland from Texas.
Predstavio bih Kena Freelanda iz Teksasa. Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Milentijević.
Perfect.
Thank you. Not bad for
10 days in Serbia.
what 10 days in Serbia can do for you. Told us in the very beginning that the Serbs need no lessons in democracy. And I'm speaking as a peace activist. I don't have expertise outside of that, but my opportunity to be here, to witness what I've witnessed, has given me the opportunity also to get a feel for the Serb and the Yugoslav culture and society. And I want to say that I'm very. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Okay. Thank you. Okay. I got to use that.
Srbima ne treba držati lekciju iz demokratije, to je suština onoga što je rekao I on je ovde došao I uverio se u to. Iz Teksasa inače je član mirovne organizacije.
I guess my greatest impression is that so many Serbs have taken the time to learn English, and so few people in America have taken the time to learn Serbian to come over here and learn about your wonderful society.
Prvi utisak je koliko ljudi ovdje govori engleski, a koliko malo Amerikanaca ovdje dolazi.
Often at the end of interviews with people that we talk with,
Yes.
we've asked them, what would you have us do?
Često kad razgovaram sa ljudima, pitam ih šta biste želeli da mi učinimo.
And half comically they respond, leave us alone.
Dobijem njihov odgovor, ostavite nas na miru.
I wish I could convey to you the extent to which those of us in the American peace movement
Ja bih žela da vam
feel the same way.
Žela bih da vam predstavim koliko mi radimo u okviru mirovnog pokreta.
This is our heartfelt desire that America would leave people alone in the rest of the world.
I upravo je želja tog našeg pokreta da Amerika ostavi ljude na miru.
Everywhere we go, we've been treated with openness, candor, hospitality, and people forthcoming with evidence, testimony, and documentation in an incredible way.
Isto tako je ostavio utisak na njega ta otvorenost, ljubaznost Jugoslovena i spremnost da svedoče o onome što im se događalo.
I'd like to challenge my fellow countrymen to stand on the streets of Niš to witness the effects of the carpet bombing on residential areas.
Voleo bih da moji sunarodnici recimo posete Niš i pogledaju kakvi su rezultati tepih bombardovanja stambenih četvrti.
To stand beneath the twisted wreckage of the Zastava auto plant in Niš, in Grunjevac.
Da obiđu Kragujevačku zastavu i vide tamo što se događalo.
And not say that they are not standing on the scene of the crime of the century.
I da posle toga, pošto to se vide, ne kažu da nije reč o zločinu ovog veka, najvećem zločinu ovog veka.
I'd like to challenge politicians and especially the American pilots to spend a week or two getting to know the wonderful people of Yugoslavia personally.
A volio bi da recimo američki vojnici, a naročito piloti, posete, ostanu nedelju dve u Jugoslaviji i upoznaju se sa Jugoslovenijom.
Would they still be able to push buttons at 30,000 feet to kill and maim these people?
Da li bi onda mogli da pritiskaju dugme sa 30.000 stopa?
Or would they have to stop?
I ubijaju, da.
Or would they have to stop and consider the human dimensions of their acts?
Ili bi prestali kada bi videli humane dimenzije njihovih dela.
Like those brave Spanish pilots who I understand refused to follow the criminal orders of their commanding officers.
Kao i jedan pilot koji je odbio da izvrši naređenje.
španski pilot.
Španski pilot, da.
The people of Yugoslavia are to be congratulated. Oh, I'm sorry, just a second. The sanctions are the other issue that are real concern to me, because I've realized that even though they do a lot of damage economically and in so many other ways to the people of Yugoslavia,
Drugo pitanje su sankcije koje, iako čine ogromnu štetu ekonomsku Jugoslovenima,
that the worst damage they've done
najgora šteta, najveća šteta je
is to sanction the truth from the American people.
što sankcioniše istinu koja je dostupna Amerikancima.
Well, one side has had at its disposal not only sympathetic military and press pundits,
Jedan aspekt je otkrivanje,
but also purchased politicians and professional public relations agencies.
mnogih grešaka koje su počinili, znači mnogih manipulacija novinskih agencija i predsjednika za štampu.
The Serbian side has not been presented at all.
Srpska strana u svim tim izveštavanjima medija nije uopšte prikazana, nije bila prisutna.
The people of Yugoslavia are to be congratulated for their incredible resilience
Želeo bih da čestitam narodu Jugoslavije na njihovoj stambenosti
in the job of reconstruction and recovery.
i na obnovi koju su započeli.
This spirit is not only astonishing and overwhelming,
Ovaj duh ne samo da je zapanjujući i impresivan,
but we hope contagious. But we hope it's contagious, that we will catch it too.
a nadamo se da se i prenosi, da i mi možemo da uhvatimo nešto od tog duha.
Because our task is equally daunting. We must return to the hostile territory of the existing American government and our obsequious, mendacious mainstream press.
Jer mi sad treba da se vratimo na teren američke vlade i da se suočimo sa tamošnjim medijima.
Neprijateljski teren.
Neprijateljski teren, da.
To fight the uphill battle to relate the truth of what we have discovered here to our fellow citizens.
Da vodimo bitku za otkrivanje prave istine.
Thank you.
I would like to also introduce at this time Mr. Gregory Elich, who is an independent journalist from Ohio and who contributed greatly to this trip. Among the humanitarian forms of humanitarian aid that we have brought or have organized for Yugoslavia includes computers for a school in Aleksinac. I'm sorry, Sudovica. And so I'll let you listen to Mr. Elich.
Želim bih da predstavim Gregora Ilića iz Ohaja, nezavisnog novinara, koji između ostalog i doneo određenu pomoć, a između ostalog su tu i kompjuteri za školu u Surdulici.
And Mr. Elich played the main role in getting us those computers.
I on je igrao glavnu ulogu, najviše je zaslužen za donošenje tih kompjutera. Yes.
We have seen terrible things.
Videli smo strašne stvari.
Disturbing images of destruction and the voices of witnesses haunt my mind.
Proganjat će me sve one slike strašne koje sam vidio i svedočenja.
We have seen a pattern of deliberate destruction of Yugoslavia as an industrial economy and terror bombing of the population.
Videli smo model, obrazac namernog uništavanja Jugoslavije, ekonomskog i svakog drugog.
NATO has imposed an occupation of Bosnia-Herzegovina, Macedonia, Albania, and now Kosovo region.
NATO je izvršio okupaciju Bosne, Makedonije, Albanije, a sada i Kosova.
NATO bases have been built in Bulgaria and Croatia.
NATO baze su izgrađene u Bugarskoj i Hrvatskoj.
The West is colonizing the region as it seeks to impose its control over the labor and resources of the Balkans.
Zapad kolonizuje ovaj region da bi iskoristio radnu snagu.
As one Yugoslav worker told us, you were bombed because you refused to be slaves.
Kao što reče jedan jugoslavski radnik, bombardujete nas zato što smo odbili da budemo robovi.
Your independence is something you can be proud of.
Vaša nezavisnost je nešto čime treba se ponositi.
NATO is a gangster organization which operates in violation of international law.
NATO je gangsterska organizacija koja krši međunarodno pravo.
Our investigation for the Ramsey-Clark Commission is only part of a larger effort
Naša istraga u ime komisije Ramsey-Clarka samo je deo jednog šireg napora
to change Western public opinion and foreign policy
da se promeni zapadno javno mnjenje i formuliše jedna politika
and bring about a return to international law.
I da se vrati međunarodni pravni poredak.
In my case, I will be giving all of my documentation to the Ramsey-Clark's War Crimes Tribunal.
U mom slučaju ja ću svu dokumentaciju preneti komisiji Ramsey-Clarka.
I will also be posting information on Ramsey-Clark's International Action Center website.
I također ću staviti te informacije na website Međunarodnog akcionog centra.
I will write and attempt to publish articles on what we've seen.
I pisat ću članke o onome što smo videli.
And I'll be giving slide presentations and speeches throughout the region of the U.S. where I live.
Priređivat ću projekcije i govorit ću, znači sa slajdovima i govorit ću, drži predavanja o onome što smo videli.
All of us are deeply impressed with what we've seen of Yugoslavia, its culture, and its people.
Svi smo duboko impresionirani onim što smo videli u Jugoslaviji, kulturom i narodom Jugoslavije.
And we are determined to continue our struggle to change this barbaric policy.
I rešeni smo da istrajemo u borbi za promenu jedne varvarske politike.
I would like to next introduce a young student from the City University of New York. Mr. Joe.
član delegacije koji želi nešto da kaže.
Mr. Joseph Friendly, who, as I mentioned earlier, is a
Joseph
TV
Friendly.
journalist in New York City.
TV novinar iz Njujorka.
As Jeffrey has just explained, our task is education.
Kao što je Jeffrey upravo objasnio, naš zadatak je obrazovne prirode.
We talk of truth making us free,
Govorimo da nas istina čini slobodnima,
but as a people in America, we suffer from not being free because of a lack of truth.
ali kao narod Amerike mi patimo od neslobode zbog odsustva istine.
We have a media war.
Kod nas se vodi medijski rat.
On our side, we have the alternative media,
Na našoj strani su alternativni mediji,
the People's Video Network,
video mreža široka,
which has programs in about 150 cities in the United States.
koja ima svoje programe u 150 gradova Amerike.
And we have Free Speech TV,
Imamo i televiziju takozvanu slobodne reči, da,
which also has several hundred outlets in the United States.
koja takođe ima nekoliko stotina slušalaca, da.
And my task is to take the 40 or so hours of video that I've shot in this country.
A moj zadatak je da snimim više sati video materijala.
Uzmem koliko? How many?
About 40.
40
On je
sati.
snimio 40 časova dok je bio ovdje po Srbiji.
40 sati video materijala po Srbiji. To je bio njegov zadatak.
And to present what is certainly a dramatic and compelling story.
I da bih prikazao jednu dramatičnu priču.
Da bih prikazao ono što je dramatična priča.
Of horrible and condemnable wrongdoing by our government.
O strašnim nedelima naše vlade koji su za svaku osudu.
To wake up the American people.
Kako bih osvestio, trgnuo iz sna američki narod.
In wondering how to present this material,
Pitajući se kako taj materijal da prikažem,
I picture street scenes of the people of your country walking around in the streets.
Snimao sam naprosto ljude kako šetaju ulicama ovdje kod vas.
And
Kad pitam sebe kako da prikažem tu sliku, prikazat ću ljude kako se šetaju ulicama i sad ćemo
and your wonderful farmland with its fields of corn and sunflowers,
Vaše divne seoske pejzaže.
and to contrast that with the scenes of destruction and the tearing of human flesh.
A kao kontrast tome, užasne prizore razaranja i ljudske krvi.
And to ask the American people how that could possibly be justified.
I da bih postavio pitanje američkom narodu kako se ovo uopšte može pravdati.
In shooting our interviews, we have often asked your citizens if they could explain why, if they could offer a theory for why this horrible destruction has occurred to them by the United States and NATO.
Snimajući intervjue, postavljao sam pitanje vašim građanima imaju li oni neku teoriju i mišljenje zašto je uopšte došlo do ovoga.
And their puzzlement, their throwing up their arms in amazement is dramatic evidence of their true innocence.
Njihova zbunjenost, zaprepašćenje upravo i svedoči o potpunoj nevinosti.
People who have looked to America for culture and world leadership.
Ljudi su ovde upirali poglede u Ameriku kad je reč o kulturi i liderstvu.
Are so deeply saddened and disappointed.
Pa se zato sada osjećaju duboko razočarani.
So if we can convince the American people of the wrongdoing of our country,
Ako uspemo da američki narod ubedimo da je njihova zemlja učinila nedela,
they might well rise up against the U.S. government
možda će pobuniti se protiv američke vlade,
as the U.S. government foolishly expects of the Yugoslavian people.
Kao što je američka vlada ludo
Očekuje
naivno od
da
ćemo uraditi u njoj.
So, thank you for letting us do what we did.
Well, I got sued by a lawyer who was after my loot. He was a white man in a business suit. I got